We'll turn now to Natia Seskuria. She's the Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Natia.
Thank you for having me.
So in the past, you've talked about how Russia will not stop at Ukraine. These are kind of signs of Putin's desire to expand his influence that have been visible for a while. Do you see this as a logical conclusion to his actions in 2008 in Georgia and in 2014 in Crimea?
Yes, definitely. I think, unfortunately, what we are seeing now, a terrible tragedy that is being unfolded in Ukraine, is a logical continuation to what Russia has been doing for throughout many years. But sadly, I think this is the scenario that we have feared the most, a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, rather than a limited operation to the Donbas region, which would have been a disaster as well. But some of the experts have not gone as far as to imagine that Putin would basically engage in such a devastating conflict and wage a war against peaceful population of Ukraine. So what we see now is a result of the failure as well of the Western policy towards Russia, because throughout many years, this policy hasn't been tough enough for Russia and against Russia. And we have seen a number of attempts to appease Putin's Russia. And I think these attempts have been widely perceived by Putin himself as a weakness, as a Western weakness. So there is no indication that if Putin is successful with his aims in Ukraine, there is no indication that, unfortunately, he will stop there.
Nadia, do you think that there's anything that could have been done to stop the war we're seeing play out today?
We saw that a number of diplomatic efforts were made, and Western leaders went many times, both in Moscow and Kiev, and they tried to negotiate with Putin. But I'm afraid, unfortunately, Putin initially was not interested in negotiations. And we saw very tough rhetoric from Russia's side, very aggressive rhetoric. A number of comments that Putin made were, in fact, engaged the twisting of the entire history of Ukraine by claiming that Russia created Ukraine and where Ukraine is not even a sovereign country. So I think the problem is that initially Russian demands were non-starters, and they hoped to achieve concessions, which they couldn't, obviously, because making concessions from the Western side, from the Ukrainian side, would mean Ukraine losing sovereignty. So in this case, Putin decided to go for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and what we are seeing now is a tragedy of our century.
Natia, are you surprised to see the scale of this invasion? And as we await to see what's happening in the capital of Kiev, what do you think is in the short to midterm future for Ukraine?
A full-scale invasion was indeed the riskiest option, even for Moscow, I think, because in terms of the potential political and economic costs, this could be very costly for Moscow. And in terms of casualties as well, from both sides, actually, we have already heard that, unfortunately, there are casualties on the Ukrainian side. And Ukrainians will fight. They are already fighting, defending their country. And this will be a bloody war. And unfortunately, the next couple of days will be very tragic, I think. And there is no indication that Russia will stop. They have an aim to go into Kiev. There have been already bombings in Kiev, and the population is fleeing the capital for the sake of finding security elsewhere. So I think what we see now is the worst case scenario. My expectation is that the West will be able to impose the toughest sanctions. I don't have hopes that these sanctions will stop Putin. I think sanctions must be joined with attempts to, for example, impose non-fly zone over Ukraine, and as well as continuing arming Ukraine, which is very important for Ukrainians to be able to protect themselves.
All right, Natia Seskuria, we'll keep it there. Thank you so much for that analysis.